Hey folks, Ed Williams here, Dr. Ed Williams. This is the Aesthetic Water Cooler. I want to thank Equa Marketing for putting this together. And this will probably be our last water cooler for the series. We agreed to do this for a year, and it's been a very fun journey. I was going to talk today about strategic planning, but I get a lot of questions at our society meetings about how to become a leader in our specialty, how to become recognized as a leader in the specialty. So I thought it would be good to finish up on that note. Since we won't be continuing with the aesthetic water cooler, anyone who does have any questions, I do have a website. It's dredwinwilliams.com. There's a lot of educational information there on aesthetic medicine, building a business. There's blogs. There's a book that we just put the finishing touches on called The White Coat Entrepreneur. It's basically my journey, trials, tribulations, lessons learned in building a business. Also, as the Aesthetic Water Cooler and Equa Marketing will continue, our growing plastic surgeon will continue to provide you information as well. So again, because I get asked this question so frequently, how to become a leader in your society, I wanted to kind of tell my personal story because there are a lot of younger folks, and let's face it, it's time for the next generation. We need the next generation to not just step up, but be involved and get as much out of their academy or society as I have over the past many, many years. Many of you know I was president of the American Academy of Facial Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery from 2015 to 2016. It's important that you understand this is not something that I aspired to do once upon a time. In fact, the first time I was asked to run as president, I turned it down. So, I've been on different boards, and I want to quote one person I had a lot of respect for. He said, I'm always suspicious of the person who wants the job too much. So, it wasn't like I went down this road, but I want to tell you my story because I do think it's important for people who are confused, who do have aspirations to get involved with their national societies, to say, how do I get there? What's a road? Now, I also want to put a little bit of a sales pitch here for being involved. And I think it's critical that we get involved with our society. For me, it's the AEF PRS. There's a couple of reasons. One, these are my friends, these are my relationships, these are my peeps. I mean, I run into colleagues of mine, people I've mentored maybe 10, 15 years ago, and they're so appreciative of the things that I've done to help them get their practice going. Whenever we fight battles in the trenches together, right? Whether it's some political battle or, it brings us closer together. Whenever we have adversity, it brings us closer together. So I have friends all over the country, all over the world. And, I get invites internationally to speak at meetings. That probably wouldn't happen if I didn't get involved with the AEF PRS and speak at our meetings. I've made a lot of friends all over the place. And I basically have to turn most of them down because, I've got a family still. I still have one in high school, and I don't want to be gone all the time. However, as I look toward the future, I can't think of anything more fun than going to a meeting in Germany and speaking on rhinoplasty and getting immersed in the culture with friends of mine. People that I've known over the years who have come to our meetings, and I've gotten to know them. So that's really pretty cool. The other reason to get involved is advocacy. And, we will continue to always have political issues, political wars, and things we need to resolve. And if we don't get involved, decisions are going to be made for us, and many of them may not be decisions that you want. I'll give you an example. The Affordable Care Act, I've said this before, I'll say it again. Go back and read my address in 2015. It's a disaster for physicians. And I think part of the reason is that physicians were not involved at all in the forming of the Affordable Care Act. It's all in Stephen Brill's book, America's Better Pill. Now, at the AFPRS fall meeting, I gave a 20-minute talk on the state of affairs of 2019 facial plastic surgery and aesthetic surgery moving forward. If you're interested, it's about a 20-minute summary You can get that through our website, dredwinwilliams.com. You can find that video. I basically recap what happened with the Affordable Care Act and where we're going in the future, and make some predictions. And I'm pretty good at that. So if you're interested, it's there. But as far as advocacy and how important it is, this is a classic example. And in all fairness to doctors get busy, and they're exhausted at the end of the day, and they don't necessarily want to become involved. I always say that life's about priorities, and priorities are what you do and not what you say. And what I actually do is I carve out the time to be involved. Now, if you're not I'm not, by the way, by nature, I'm not a politician. I'm actually a decent businessman, if you will, business person, but I don't really love politics per se. So I never really had a political agenda, but I realized it was important for our academy. Now, we, coming from, we've had our AEF PRS, the AEF PRS celebrated its 50th anniversary a few years ago, but it wasn't always easy. And those of us who fought the battles, we don't want to become complacent moving forward. So if I can just make a pitch to those out there, there's a coalition it was started out as a coalition for injectables. It was from oculoplastic, eye plastics, derm surge, plastic surgery, and facial plastic surgery. We get together once a year to talk about our issues and how we can come together, because in reality, it's important that we make decisions together as a group. Okay, this is really important versus letting the legislators make decisions. I'll give you one example: single vial use. Imagine if, and we were not able to come together, and we fought this with this coalition as a group. Imagine if the legislators mandated that you had to use Botox as a single use. Just think of the ramifications of that to your practice, to your patients. Heavy-handed legislation that doesn't really make sense. Well, we were effective as a group with this coalition in defeating it during the time that I was president. So being, either you're what they say, either you're at the table, or you're part of the menu. And so it is important to get involved and do your fair share. I never wanted to be the person who was just taking, and it always, it always bothers me when people don't stay involved, because let's all do our fair share. So, what it really comes down to is leadership, and I'm going to tell you about my leadership journey through the AEF PRS and how I ended up where I was. For those who are interested, because I know there are a lot of young aspiring doctors who want to do the right thing and who want to be, represent their society. But what bothered me when I was AEF PRS president, I looked at why we were having declining membership, and I think part of it was people didn't understand the value of being a member of the AEF PRS. And what happened is, of every fellow who finished, 5 years later, only 50% of people who finished fellowship training, fresh out of their training, 5 years later, only 50% were members of the AEF PRS. And this really bothered me. Where are we losing our young people to? And in reality, what would happen is people would go out and they would get their board certification, because, as you know, the American Board of Facial Plastic Surgery, the body that certifies our members, is separate, and you can get board certification without being an AEF PRS member. And so once people would get their, quote, board certification, they would just say, I don't need the AEF PRS, and so I'm going to go out into the community and I'm going to practice and going to get my education where I get my education. But it's important to remember you can't forget the importance of advocacy, because let's just use an example. If all of a sudden you're in a community and you want to get privileges somewhere, and you now are having a group of plastic surgeons who are trying to run you out of the hospital, and make disparaging comments about you and attack your credentialing, who is going to, or if there's, for example, there now and then you get some legislation that all of a sudden looks like it's going to go through, that you have to be ABMS board certified to advertise your board. That would impact all of us. And who fights those battles? And it's the AEF PRS. So I've had members of ours in the past who say, well, I really haven't been to an AEF PRS meeting, and why should I pay my $1,000 dues? Here's my point. If you're not going to get involved, at least support the people who are involved and are chinning to the bar, for your organization on your behalf. And so that's my pitch, my sales pitch for getting involved. I have to tell you, it's been one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done in my life. I look back at it and I am very fulfilled, knowing that I left the academy in better shape than when I came on, and knowing that I did my fair share. So my leadership journey, the AEF PRS, kind of goes like this. Personal, and then there's the AEF PRS journey. So the personal journey was, I was like most of us. I went out and I started to practice. And I worked and I worked my rear end off. So that was 1992. And I don't want to get into the politics of the battles and the things that but by around 2004, 2005, I was so darn busy. And I realized that my staff costs were eating me alive, and I didn't understand how to run a business, and I didn't understand what it meant to be a good leader. Now, the AMA has, quote, leadership training. And in fact, there are a lot of people that throw this leadership term around very loosely. And I am almost obsessed with now becoming a better leader because I can make a bigger impact. And so I started doing a lot of reading. I read, Jack Welch's couple of books, Straight from the Gut and Winning. Because I'm thinking, look, here's a guy who may have been one of the best CEOs of all time, from about 1982 until about 2001 when Jeff Immelt took over. And I thought, well, if there's something to be learned, I want to learn from somebody like him. John Maxwell is another he's got a lot of leadership material out there, and someone I've really learned a lot from. His book is 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. What I like about I learned something about John Maxwell that I really like. He says, you want to see, and I'm going to circle back and tell you why this is relevant. He says, if you want to see the best leaders, look at the volunteer organizations. And I thought for a minute, I'm like, well, what? Because you know what? People don't have to stay involved if they don't want to. You see? And so he says some of the best leaders are in some of the biggest churches that are successful. And he was in the ministry out in a big church out in California. I think by default, he ended up as a pastor. And the church really grew. And then he decided to go out and, become, get out in the public sector and take a lot of leadership skills that he learned. And so I can't really do enough justice to his work. I would encourage you to look into his work as well. And then Jim Collins, who I can't quote his books enough. Built to Last, Good to Great, Great by Choice. Really studied effective business leaders. And to me, maybe I'm partial, to business leaders because I really feel that they are held accountable to their results. We have a lot of politicians who end up in office and they're duds. And I think because it's a popularity contest, many of them really haven't done anything. But if you get appointed CEO and you deliver to your shareholders and you deliver to the board, that to me is kind of proof positive that you're a good leader. So my personal journey is around 2005. I started to really pay more attention to those kind of things. Now, and then I continue to get better, and I continue to get better. A few weeks ago, I was at an event. It's called EO Nerve down in Charleston. I went 2 days down there, and to this day, I still spend a lot of time trying to become a better leader. I went to this training called the Arbinger Institute. I got to tell you, some of the best leadership training I've ever had, because I have now, a lot of employees, and we have a lot of people on our team, and I really want to make sure I'm doing the right thing and becoming a better leader for my team. So that's, kind of the personal journey. I'm not going to go into it more because I talk more about it in other things, but that is what motivated me. And I go back to, what if you got someone who's running a business and they've got 1,000 employees, right? And if they can make them by being a better leader, 10% more effective, they're a valuable person. So I kept that in the back of my mind, and I started to become a better business leader. But getting back to my journey in the AEF PRS, getting back to my journey of the AEF PRS, I finished in 92, and I'll be honest, I didn't really have a good mentor. I had two, at least from involvement of the AEF PRS. I had good teaching mentors. But one of my mentors was ready to retire in a couple of years, and the other was new in his career. And so my point is this, the best mentor is typically, 10, 15 years older. They can offer you, they can teach you, and they take a vested interest in you. I'll be honest, I just didn't really have anyone take an interest in me, and that's okay. I kind of found my way. And the reason I say that is because I've had someone say, well, someone must have opened doors for you or gave you a leg up with the academy. And it really wasn't that case. What I did is because I went out on my own, I made a personal commitment to the academy. I was so grateful for what I had learned over the years, the people who have taught me, that I said, I'm going to definitely go to every AEF PRS meeting, fall meeting. And I got to tell you, in 27 years, I don't think I've missed an AEF PRS fall meeting. But here's how it kind of happened for me. My professional journey, like I said, is I started going to the meetings. Now, the meetings, the way they're set up, are fall meeting, and I think most societies are the same. And so I think these comments are the same, depending on whether you're, in derm surge or whether you're a plastic surgeon. But go to the society meetings. You're going to get your education other places, but realize how important your organization is for advocacy. For you, as a derm surgeon, you have certain things that are important to you that may not be important to a plastic surgeon. So go to the meeting, and here's the thing. So the board meetings are typically tied to the annual fall meeting. Your board meeting where, there's a change of the guard, a new president comes in, new president goes out. But go to the committee meetings. So typically you have a whole day of committee meetings, and then the committee meetings report to the board and during the board agenda. So I would go to the committee meetings, and I would just sit there and listen. Now, what I did is I picked a couple committee meetings that sounded interesting to me. For example, we have the Public Relations Committee. We have the CME Committee. We have the Fellowship Review Committee. There's those Humanitarian Efforts Committee. So go to meetings that are interesting to you. And for me, I loved education. And I was fascinated by public relations. I wanted to know what was going on at the academy level. What are we doing for our PR? What are we doing for our people? So I went to the Public Relations Committee. I go to the CME Committee. And I would just sit there, and then afterwards I'd go up and I'd introduce myself to so-and-so. And I would say, who I was and where I did my fellowship. And naturally, it's a small enough organization, all of these are, that you know someone that knows someone, and you get in a conversation. And then the next time they remember who you are. So that's the first thing. Just introduce yourself to people. But if you go to the committee meetings, the challenge that I find a lot of people say to me, especially young ones, I got to get there a day early. Yeah, you got to get there a day early. You take a day out of your practice. You get there a day early. You eat another hotel room night. You take away from your family. I get that, but get there. And the next thing you know, you're going to start to know more and more people. And the next thing you know, you're given an opportunity to maybe do something. Like somebody says, hey, we want to call, I don't know. Last year we had 50 fellows finish from the academy, and we want to make sure that all of them are members, right? So you volunteer to call 10 of them, So you volunteer to do some things, and next thing you know, someone asked you to do something else. The next thing you know, and 4 or 5 or 6 years go by, and all of a sudden now you've become board certified, you're elevated to fellowship status in the academy. And somebody says to you, hey, you get a call from the nominating committee and says, hey, would you consider, taking a position on the board? Now, the way the board works is that you have all these board positions. And so I'm going to explain our academy because a lot of people, I didn't understand the academy and the function and how it all works. So we have the academy side, which is one organization, and then we have the foundation side, okay? So you get the academy, you get the foundation. On the academy side, that is all of our educational efforts and our kind of our advocacy type stuff. On the foundation, which think of foundation, 501c, it's non-for-profit, that's our humanitarian efforts and our research efforts. So there's the academy and the foundation. And the academy and foundation share 3 positions. They share the president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary. And so they share those positions. And then the academy has 2 group vice presidents, Okay, and the foundation has two group vice presidents. So the academy has the group vice president for education, and they've got the group vice president for public relations, which has been changed, I believe, to governmental and economic affairs or something like that. And then you have a slate of board members. Okay, on the foundation side, you have the group VP for humanitarian and efforts, and then you've got the group VP for research. And then you have, again, a slate of board members. So again, think of like a, you got two tables that go down, each board on each side. They convene at the head table, which is president, vice president, treasury, secretary. Now, what happens is all of a sudden you get a board position that opens up, and it's regional Eastern Regional Director board, is a board position. Now, when that position opens up, because that's a 3-year position, there's only so many people that they have that are fellows, that are fellows that come to the meetings. I mean, no one's going to just pull someone, just say, oh, we should have had Jane Doe, as a board member, because she hasn't been very visible. So if you want to be on the board, and again, I never aspired to this, but if that's something you would like to be part of the leadership and part of contribute, where you go, next thing you know, all of a sudden you get a call from the nominating committee, because they have looked at the list now, and there's only really 4 or 5 people that fit the criteria and actually show up at all the meetings. And then you're getting a call. And by the way, you've been visible because you've been helping out, you're contributing, you're doing some stuff. And we're not talking about huge burden stuff. We're just talking about contributing. And now all of a sudden someone's, hey, would you mind, running for board position? You say, yeah, okay. And, if you're like me, you lose that election once or twice. I think I lost once to Craig Murakami, who's a dear friend of mine. And, you can't take any of this stuff personally, right? So the next time around, I win and I'm on the board, so, and I ended up on the board for 12 or 13 years. But what happens, what I do whenever I'm on a board or an organization is I do a lot of listening the first year or two. I just pay attention to try to understand, the old saying is leadership is influence. You pay attention to who has the influence on that board. President runs the meeting, but there's still people that have influence. And I find that fascinating because, again, it's another exercise in leadership. I digress a little bit. As I was leading up to this and I realized the importance of being a good leader, I looked at volunteer opportunities to basically get some experience with leadership. And one of the things that I did, I was involved, we have the old Chatham Hunt Club. We got about 400 members or something. And there's 3 different factions. There's fox hunting and beagling. And someone comes up to me one day and says, hey, would you mind being on the board? And I'm on the board. Next thing you know, they're asking me if I'd run for president. And I looked at that as an opportunity to, run meetings and become a better leader. So the first thing I did is I read this book called Robert's Rules. And I would encourage anyone who gets involved with an organization or society to there's like the condensed version of Robert's Rules. In other words, how do you make a motion? How do you take something to the floor? When to make a motion to adjourn? When to make a motion to put something to committee? And because you'll find a lot of volunteer organizations, including our academy, is most people don't know how to do this correctly. And it's really pretty, there's like priority rules and Robert's Rules really came from parliamentary proceeding, right? I mean, in Parliament, you can't just speak out of turn. There's got to be a way to conduct business that is respectful and effective, and yet people get heard, but can't go on and on forever. So I read Robert's Rules and I practiced, and I remember when I was, the first year I was president of the old Chatham Hunt Club, I remember the past president said to me, I don't know how you're going to do this. It's like a full-time job with me. I spend 20, 25 hours a week. And I remember saying her to very respectfully, I said, Rima, I'll tell you how I'm going to do it. I don't have 20 to 25 hours a week, but it's going to get done. And what it did is it made me extremely efficient and extremely effective, and learned how to become a better leader. So let me jump back over to, and I really enjoyed my time there. I felt like I made a big impact. And let me tell you, our board meetings for the Old Chatham Hunt Club were 1 hour. Well, the AEF PRS board meetings don't last 1 hour. They start at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and they typically are supposed to finish at 9 to 10 o'clock at night. If we have contentious discussions, they'll go on to 1 or 2 in the morning. And your job as president, when you're doing that, is to really keep people from coming off the rails, right? Because you get people to get emotional about certain things, and you want to get. And we don't need to get into the specific discussions. But what happens is now you're on the board, and all of a sudden, a group, a board position may be a 3-year position, right? So the regional group VP position, comes up. A group vice president for public relations, right, comes up. And now, who are the best candidates for a group vice president position or a treasury position or secretary for that matter? Well, I'll tell you who they are, and it's basically other people on the board. No one's going to go to membership and pull someone from membership and bring them up to a group vice president position, you see. So what happens is, if you're there, you just kind of move up the board because there's a limited number of people who actually know the organization, know what's going on, know the politics, and you kind of gravitate, up. And like I said, the first time I was asked to run for president, I'd been there for maybe 8 or 9 years, and I still didn't have what I would consider a real solid handle on the workings of the academy. So I declined it. And there was one other factor. My kids were teenagers, and I just didn't want to be on the road. As much as that position would be, in reality and in retrospect, I should have just taken the job, because the best way to get off the board is become president, and then you're off, But even as a president, the position is you get president. So your first year, you're president-elect. Second year, you're president. And then the last year, you're past president. And that's done for continuity and overlap in the academy. And so in that position, you want to make sure there's some institutional memory, and what we did a couple of years ago, and that's why that position. But here it is. That position's a 3-year position. So, all said and done, I was probably on the board for about 12 years. So, people ask me, what did it cost your practice being away? I don't know. I've heard numbers kicked around. It's going to cost you 20% of your revenue or something. I don't really know what it costs, but I have to tell you, it's been one of the most gratifying things I've ever done, is to become a president of our academy and feel like I have done my fair share. We had some real challenges the year we had been losing money for 5 years, and so I had a big thing on my plate. I had to basically not renew the contract for our current executive vice president. I hired a different one. I fired our meeting planner, brought meeting in-house. I basically took the can and shook it upside down, and we cleaned house. We put a whole new initiative together to get our young people back to the academy meetings by bringing them back to the meetings. And I'm proud to say, 3 or 4 years later, we're in the black. We have a terrific EVP, but you can make a big impact. And like I said, I'm very proud and grateful to have had the opportunity to serve our academy. So I'm going to run this a little short. This is probably only a 30-minute podcast, but I know I get this question so many times from the people that I mentee and people I see at the meeting. But number one, just get involved, show up at the meetings, and it does require a commitment. If what did it cost me? If you think about it, what did it cost me to take a day out of my practice, a day early, for the last 27 years, to get there early, take an extra hotel room, and show up at this meeting? I don't know, and I don't really care, because I've gained so much more out of my time being involved with the AEF PRS. I feel like I have friends all over the world. I'll tell you a little story. 2013, we had a house fire. Our house burned to the ground. We lost everything. I mean, everything. Including a couple of our dogs. And I had, the warmth, the love that came from all over the country, the world. I had people sending me checks But it made me realize, the kind of friends that I made. And there aren't a lot of people that have that common bond, because we go through the trenches together. And until you have gone through, what it takes to get through medical school and residency, and then, the camaraderie that's built in doing a residency together and watching out for each other, in the trenches, if you will, there's an incredible bond and friendship that you gain from that. And so I wouldn't trade that experience for anything, really. And I'm grateful for have had the opportunity to serve the Academy. So I'm going to wrap up. If anyone has any questions, I'd encourage you to go ahead and shoot them to me. You can either, get me now or send them through our website, which is dredwinwilliams.com, where I have books and podcasts. And, books and book and blogs and videos, educational videos there for anyone who is interested. I don't have anything else right yet, Lila. How about you? Do you have any housekeeping items?
No, I think that covers it.
All right.
Then a pleasure working with you.
Likewise, Lila. And again, I think the aesthetic water cooler is going to continue doing their thing. And so you'll get more business and medicine from them. You'll get some business and medicine from me for those who are interested. And it's been a real pleasure and honor, folks. And I'm so grateful that I've had so many people follow and listen to us. So hope you all have a good evening. And that's it for now.